All right, so Holy Paladin is completely fucked, as we all know. The spec is awful, just to put it bluntly. Looking at the statistics, you can see that it's completely far behind every single other healer. If we ignore Evoker, we ignore Monk, we ignore Disc, it's significantly far behind Restoration Druid, Restoration Shaman, Holy Priest, right? You have like three kind of tiers here, right? Evoker, Monk, and Priest, Disc are all kind of competitive with one another. This looks like solid balance for these three. You have Druid, Shaman, Holy Priest, who are all again kind of close. Maybe Druid's a little bit ahead there. And then you have Holy Paladin on a tier by itself at the very bottom, completely unplayable. If you search by percentages, it really does not get better. You'll still see the same kind of gap between Holy Paladin and the other healers. Evens out maybe a little bit near this lower. I mean, it's still kind of a big gap. I was going to say it gets a little bit better, but it's still completely fucking awful. I always think it's funny to look at Clarius's logs. Obviously, it's a little bit skewed because there's not a ton of logs yet. But if we look at his rank 1 logs, right? So rank 1 Light Blinded Vanguard, rank 1 Dragon's Boss. He's rank 1ing and people in his guild are getting 30s, right? And of course there's only 33 parses, but this parse, a 32 percentile, is still going to be higher than the rank 1 Holy Paladin. And again, there's not a lot of parses, so it's a little bit skewed. I think this one is good too, right? Again, this was an early kill, so there's not a lot of parses, but a 98th percentile log. Every other healer in his guild is parsing green, and he's doing the same amount of healing. A more recent kill, I think, also paints a good picture. He's doing the same, like legitimately the same HPS as an Evoker, and he's almost 30% behind. There's a ton fucked with the spec, but thankfully we are going to get buffed on April 3rd. We're getting some Word of Glory healing increased by 20%. This also applies to Eternal Flame, and we're getting Light of Dawn healing increased by 20%. If we end up looking at the logs, looking at the data, that's going to be close to a 4 to 5% buff overall, right? So really, it's not gonna make a dent in the statistics. It's the right direction, right? Spenders are incredibly weak. It feels like the only ability that moves your health is your Holy Light, so that's a good change. But the issue is that you're just spamming Light of Dawn. You're just spamming Light of Dawn over and over and over again in raid, and it just feels like nothing you do matters. A large chunk of damage goes out. It's mathematically the best decision to just press Light of Dawn, right? If you press Eternal Flame, it's going to be an HPS loss. Even when you're in situations like Illyria or the Dream Rift fucking boss, it's still going to be an HPS loss to put an Eternal Flame or to put to put an Eternal Flame on the healing absorbs. That's still going to be an HPS loss compared to just spamming Light of Dawn, right? And that's complete disaster. Throughout most of the War Within, we had an interesting dynamic where we would Light of Dawn if the entire raid was damaged, and Eternal Flame would overheal. And that was good, right? We would rotate between Eternal Flame for spot healing, Light of Dawn when no spot healing was needed. That was a perfectly designed rotation. But now Light of Dawn has got buffed through so many talents in the Midnight Talent Tree that you just ignore Eternal Flame pretty much entirely. Like, you really should not be pressing it. He's probably only pressing it here just for healing absorb purposes. Yeah. So it's almost all on himself for what I imagine is the healing absorb. But even then, that's an HPS loss compared to just pressing Light of Dawn, but it's more important for like the fight mechanics, so that's what he's doing. So there's a clear issue, right? Where Eternal Flame is just not good enough to be worth pressing. And then if we look at the tuning, it's getting buffed by the same amount. Obviously, there's the periodic healing, so it's a little bit higher, but it's really just not going to do enough to really skew or to change you to start pressing Word of Glory, Eternal Flame, and Raid. So now you're in a situation where all of your healing does pretty much nothing, right, in Raid. 20% of our healing here are the beacons. You can move them around. You can play a beacon of virtue if you want, but that's so much of the power it's just concentrated on a very small amount of targets. We look at Light of Dawn. Light of Dawn's obviously going to be a big amount of our healing. All of that healing is, you're like pissing. You're just pissing on players for a very small amount of healing. If we look at Holy Light has a whole other issue entirely where it is so fucking expensive and it does so much healing, which I think is good. I think it's interesting, but it's created an issue where if you just don't have Innervate, you basically cannot play the game, right? He's getting multiple Innervates so that he can then pump out Holy Lights. 159, we look at the log. A little bit longer. Yeah, so he gets innervates, all he's doing is spamming Holy Lights, right? And that's the best gameplay. That's what does the most healing, but that just doesn't feel really good. And if you do not have an innervate, you cannot do this, and you lose a fuck ton of HPS. An absurd amount of HPS if you cannot spam Holy Lights. So on top of just being an underperforming spec, it feels like we got no changes that were actually necessary to make the spec feel good. Like, spenders are great, but I'm just very, very confused why it's Word of Glory and Light of Dawn at the same percent. If this number was like 30% and this was 15, I would feel better about it, right? I would feel better if we're shifting more power into Word of Glory and Eternal Flame, because those abilities do not feel good to press and raid. All we're doing is spamming Light of Dawn, and when you buff them equally, all you're going to continue to do is spam Light of Dawn. And that's going to get into like a whole healing profile issue, which I'm not going to elaborate because I could spend an hour talking about that. But the way that Holy Paladin does healing is not good if you're spamming Light of Dawn. It is so much unimpactful healing. You're not contributing to people living or dying. And because Avenging Wrath is so weak right now, you don't have a cooldown to, again, impact when people live or die. When Eternal Flame is good, you have a little bit more of a niche. You're one of the strongest single target healers in the game. So when you have like ramp healers, like Evoker or Disc Priest, or Resto Druid, maybe old Resto Druid when it was a little bit more rampy, when you have those specs in your raid, Holy Paladin pairs really, really nicely with them, because you can kind of cover some of their weakness of single target healing. But you don't do that right now. All you do is meaningless flat healing through Light of Dawn. So that's a huge issue entirely, why they did not change that. And I think the problem started on this tuning. This tuning was February 17th. So this was right before a midnight release, a month or so before midnight release. And what we're looking here for specifically is this change. This changed Empyrean Legacy. We can go look at the talent real quick. If this wants to stop lagging. Right here. Judgment critical strikes empower your next Word of Glory to automatically cast Light of Dawn, right? So this also gives you a nice, like, now I'm pressing both abilities kind of in raid, or I'm getting the effects of both abilities in raid. It feels good, right? It feels good. It aligns with what a lot of players want. Not so much me, but a lot of players want to be able to cast DPS-like abilities, right? And this one feels good because you're getting a lot of healing value out of it. You press Judgment, you're getting a free Light of Dawn for that global pretty much when you cast your next Word of Glory or your Eternal Flame. But they nerfed the fuck out of this ability. So it used to cast Light of Dawn at 125% effectiveness. Now it casts it at 30. This change right here may stack up to 2 times. Entirely fucking irrelevant. Does not matter at all. Does not. It just does not. But they effectively shot this talent in the fucking head. What this means is now Judgment is fucking awful. If we look at Clarius's logs from raid testing, so this was January 23rd. This was a month before this patch notes. If we look at his cast logs, what we're going to see is a lot more Judgment, right? He's pressing Judgment a lot more because it's a really, really good ability. He's also going to be pressing Light of Dawn. That's because even throughout beta, Light of Dawn was significantly better than Eternal Flame. That hasn't changed. But we're seeing more Judgment, right? We're seeing more Judgment because it's going to contribute more to like our Empyrean Legacy through pressing Eternal Flame, and then we press Light of Dawn, right? We get to press both, and it feels a little bit good. The issue is now it's not worth pressing Judgment at all, right? They've nerfed Judgment so far to the ground that you do not press Judgment in raid, and you do not take the talents to amplify it, right? Obviously, we're going to have like Truth Prevails. We're going to have Empyrean Legacy. You're going to have Veneration, but Veneration has always been fucking awful. But the big one we're missing here, the big issue is Lightsmith heavily relies on Judgment, right? Lightsmith is going to have Hammer and Anvil. Judgment critical strikes do healing around the target, right? This is something that Lightsmith plays into. That's amplified by Resounding Strike. Oh no, yeah, Resounding Strikes. So it activates Hammer and Anvil at 100% effectiveness, right? So there's this idea that Lightsmith really wants to play into like Judgment, right? Through some of its talents. And you pick it Lightsmith, you take like Empyrean Legacy, you take Truth Prevails, you take maybe Veneration, and you play into Judgment. But Judgment by itself is a very weak ability. It needs the talents to be good for it to be worth pressing. They nerfed the fuck out of the talent, so now you do not press Judgment, right? You do not press Judgment. Even as Lightsmith, you don't want to be pressing Judgment. Like, you can talent into these talents as Lightsmith. I have a build on Icy Veins for Lightsmith and for pressing Judgment, but it's just worse. It is just worse than ignoring Judgment entirely. And for Herald of the Sun, it doesn't have Hammer and Anvil, so it has even less of a reason. So it just skips the points entirely, right? It's never going to talent into Empyrean Legacy. It's never going to take Truth Prevails because it's not worth pressing Judgment. It's better to just not press Judgment, take other talents that give you more HPS, and just press Flash of Light. There was even a point where when we were doing a lot of our theory crafting for a while, we thought maybe it's better just to take Truth Prevails and just still not press Judgment to path into Efflorescence, right? Efflorescence is a really good talent. We want this, but we have to pass through Divine Overload to get there because it just makes the most sense, right? Because we're not pressing any Judgment. And Divine Overload is another huge issue because it increases the Holy Light healing, which is already overhealing a fuck ton, and it increases mana cost, so you can't even press it, right? The entire spec just does not make sense. Nothing about the spec makes sense, and it's confusing to me why none of it has been addressed, right? They take power away from Judgment, like they give Judgment a ton of power in Midnight, right? When they remove Crusader Strike, they basically are like, we're going to get rid of Crusader Strike and all of those kind of interactions and give you Judgment as this ability we want you to rotate, right? You're going to press Holy Shock, you're going to press Judgment, then you're going to press your Holy Power spending abilities, and that's going to feel good. But they nerf the fuck out of it. So now if we look at any logs now from current live, it's just all going to be Flash of Lights, which a lot of players hate, some don't, but it's uninteresting gameplay, and it's gameplay where it feels like what you're doing in Raid does not matter. You have weak cooldowns. Avenging Wrath is pretty much irrelevant. The biggest benefit of Avenging Wrath is you get 2 free Holy Lights, which is great. But the entire spec is just fucked, right? We're reliant on innovating to do healing. If we do not have Innervate, we cannot do this, and our mana is completely fucked. He's already for a minute and a half through the fight while getting double Innervate, right? Because 15% of his healing is Holy Light, which he wants to press because it's a good ability and it's very good into the healing absorbs, but he needs the Innervate. And then that begs the question, he's getting so much value because it's a healing absorb type fight. The second you lose healing absorbs, your Holy Light value decreases significantly, and your spec kind of struggles to function because your Holy Light is doing so much healing, but there's nowhere to actually output the healing because people aren't taking enough damage or they get healed before the Holy Light finishes, right? But with healing absorbs, you can get good value, and this tier has a fuck ton of them. So we're kind of hanging on by a thread there. And then another issue entirely is if we go to the Dragon's boss, our HPS is completely inflated. None of it's real. Let me keep going back until I get there. Dragon's boss, we go to the most recent log. And you're going to see brought to the light. So 8% of his healing, 5 million. This is a class tree talent. I don't even know where the fuck it is. It's in the most random spots. Can I like search? I can search. Brought to the light. Killing an enemy that yields experience or honor causes you to explode with holy energy, healing up to 5 allies. So, I don't know why the fuck this works in Raid. I assume it's because of the ads. Obviously, a lot of ads spawn and they have XP rates or something. So you just get infinite value on this fight. He's getting 8% value from like a fake Mickey Mouse talent that only works on one fight, and he's still fucking doing the same amount of healing as an evoker who's parsing 30% lower than him. Right? Like, none of the spec makes sense. We're completely inflated on this fight by something that's not real, that doesn't exist on another fight. If I were to change to like I don't know, this has a little bit of ads, but it's okay, so it's still kind of high. Oh, that's a heroic log too. Okay, this is a good one, right? This fight's only 2%, right? So it's a 5% HPS difference in this talent's value depending on if there's ads or not. Like, why is 5% of my HPS changing like that? I'm not even doing good HPS to begin with. So the spec is completely fucked. I do not know why Judgment has not been addressed. You nerf the fuck out of the ability, the talent that really makes it worth pressing. You don't give it power elsewhere. So now you're just ignoring Judgment regardless of your talent choices. Light of Dawn has gotten so many like additional talent changes. That's another one, right? Breaking Dawn, it used to be a range increase to Light of Dawn. Now it just is a flat HPS or a healing buff to Light of Dawn, right? You don't get this for Eternal Flame. So now Eternal Flame is just fucking awful, right? You don't press it in Raid unless you want to heal into a healing absorb, which is just an HPS loss overall. None of your healing matters. Your cooldowns are weak. The spec is completely fucked. Like, it's fucked from an HPS perspective, and it does not make sense design-wise. It almost just needs a rework entirely, because it's relying on innervates to be able to function. If no innervates, you cannot press Holy Light, you cannot heal. Light of Dawn is just infinitely better than Eternal Flame, so we've removed our single target healing niche entirely. Now all of the healing we do just does not matter. Brought to the Light is some like 10%, like Mickey Mouse talent that just is inflated on a single boss. A lot of our logs to begin with are inflated by the fact there's healing absorbs. And I just don't know what they're doing. It's hard for me to stay optimistic and to believe that they know the problems when this is the changes were being made. Like, yes, this addresses spenders feeling weak, but why is it the same percent? And why are other issues of the specs not being adjusted? There's a lot of debate where like people are upset that the top specs are not being nerfed, which I don't really care too much about. I think there's a whole other element of the game that people don't think about, and that's like people have geared up their characters, they've geared them through Mythic Plus, they've spent all their crests. Players are going to be frustrated if these specs are significantly nerfed. It makes way more sense in the middle of the season to kind of raise some of these specs, I would argue. Like, yes, you could slightly nerf these, I understand it, but I don't think it's the end of the world if you don't. That's my opinion. I think you can leave them kind of as is, and it's not that big of a deal if you address the bottom feeders. But the bottom feeders are not getting enough love. 5% buff to Holy Paladin is not nearly enough for it to be even competitive. And that's the point. I don't think H-Pound needs to be a top spec. I don't care if it's a top spec. I want it to feel like you can bring it to raid without trolling your guild, and I don't think it's there. The fact that you can log into Mistweaver, you can log into Evoker, and play it at like a 30, 40, 50% level, and do as much healing as the rank 1 Holy Paladin is a problem. It is a problem. The spec is completely fucked design-wise, it does no healing, and it feels like a spit in my face that this is the changes being made. Like, it doesn't address any of the core issues gameplay-wise. It doesn't even get close to addressing power issues. So it's frustrating for me, it's frustrating for Clarius, I know, to stay optimistic and to really invest our time into helping when it just feels like they're out of touch, right? These are problems that have existed ever since this change on February 17th. We've posted feedback publicly, we've posted it privately. I know devs have seen the feedback, and it's not being listened to, which is fine. They don't have to take our feedback in, but like, you would hope they would at least take the spec a direction, right? Even if they disagree with us feeling like Judgment needs changing or Eternal Flame needs to be better, right? You would hope that they're going to push the spec farther into one direction that they think is better, but they're doing nothing, right? It's a band-aid fix that doesn't address any of the core issues, and it's just a disaster. It's disappointing. It's hard to stay motivated to care about the spec and to put effort into guide writing in the community and helping players when it feels like we aren't being listened to, and it feels like they are out of touch with the problems of the spec. And that's why it's hard, and that's why it's frustrating.